Well, in all the euphoria over the Perrottet determination to open up, there are major problems. I mentioned yesterday that when it comes to infrastructure, a federal infrastructure report indicates that there is a shortfall of well over 100,000 engineers, scientists, architects, skilled workers. The Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry Chief Executive, Andrew McKellar, said up to 150,000 skilled migrants entered the country annually before the pandemic. That number's collapsed. He's talking about the need for skilled migration to double to over 200,000 over the next 5 years. And this brings up questions, of course, of population growth, which I won't address tonight. Then there's the tourism industry. Over $100 billion has been lost since the onset of coronavirus in March last year, $100 billion. These are figures from Tourism Research Australia, but only until June this year. 101.7 billion. International travel has lost 51 billion. Then there's the question of critical workers. 250,000 foreign students, backpackers and skilled visa holders have vacated the field. Restaurants and cafes can't get staff. Employers are hopeful that school students may fill the void. But everyone will tell you they can't get staff and they're suffering accordingly. 180,000 students will graduate nationally from high school. Will that help? Farmers need 16,000 workers from somewhere to deliver the current harvest. Dominic Perrottet said, open the borders to everyone. The Prime Minister said, no, you won't. Well, farmers desperately need workers. The border between Queensland and New South Wales is closed, so professional fruit pickers and harvesters, contract harvesters, can't get from Queensland to New South Wales. So by Christmas, if that is when the Queensland borders will open, it'll be too late. I mentioned some months ago going to a funeral in Gunnedah in the northwest of New South Wales. A farmer asked me to see his orange trees sown out. Thousands of them, oranges everywhere. His problem, no one to pick them. No one to pick them. Then we learned today that lives are being put at risk as patients are forced to endure agonising delays. There's a chronic shortage of ambulance officers. People are waiting 26, 28, 40 minutes for an ambulance after making an emergency call. In New South Wales alone, Gerard Hayes has said an extra 1,500 fully trained paramedics are needed to ease the ambulance crisis. We no doubt have a shortage of workers and a shortage of skilled workers. Do we also have a problem with welfareism? Money from the government is too easy, is it? Why should I work? But what of the little businessman? Where does he fit in? How does he manage after being belted up? Well, Professor Bruce Chapman from the Australian National University created the HECS scheme for student loans in the 1980s. I remember speaking to him 2 years ago about an agricultural HECS, repayable when the farm's revenue returns to normal. Canberra talks instead about concessional loans. Indeed, the Treasurer Frydenberg in August talked about a recovery loan scheme for small to medium enterprises. It's the last thing the farmer or a small businessman wants, up to his neck post-coronavirus in debt. Professor Bruce Chapman, who, as I said, created the HECS scheme, hit the nail on the head. A small business HECS, he said, makes economic sense, but politicians know better than Professor Chapman, don't they? I don't think. He joins me again. Bruce Chapman, thank you for your time. You've already done some modelling on this, and you made a brilliant point about drought when we were talking a couple of years ago about the agricultural HECS, and you said the politics of drought is not only about helping farmers. The politics of drought is about showing the world, including city dwellers, that the government cares. And it does that by giving money away and having lots of announcements. But Professor Chapman, that's different from solving the problem, isn't it?
Well, certainly. And this particular problem that you've raised, revenue contingent loans for small business, is just the same kind of issue that we talked about 2 years ago. That is, instead of giving farmers a lot of money in grant form, when they're in drought, the idea was to provide them with loans that were repaid, but only in the future when revenue has recovered. And that's kind of what's been needed, in my view, over about the last year and a half. The small business is very reluctant to take further normal debt at the moment, even if the debt is guaranteed by the government to repay the bank. That doesn't help the small business, who in this time of great economic uncertainty, those managers and those owners must be very concerned that any kind of debt that needs to be repaid, irrespective of their financial circumstances, is very risky. And that's why I'm suggesting contingency.
May I interrupt you there, Bruce? That's exactly the issue. The government loan is repayable irrespective of financial circumstances. The trouble with your scheme is it's too simple. You're saying borrow from future revenue in good years. So that all these people in government say, oh, well, they're open to considering innovative ideas. Nothing happens. Your scheme is simple, isn't it? Pay it back when the revenue is there, not next month, the next month, when you don't have the dough. That's simply what it's about, isn't it?
That's exactly what it is about. It's about, in a sense, giving the business the capacity to borrow from themselves in the future and give themselves the revenue now when they need it, just like HECS.
Yes, I mean, when the financial circumstance, and at the moment small business is really doing it tough, they've been bashed up and smashed up and locked down and so on, you're saying where the financial circumstances of the borrower is limited, as for many small businesses now, a revenue contingent loan avoids, like you're saying, stress and anxiety. Oh, I see. You're going to give me the money now, the HECS loan. I don't have to make a payment next month. I make it when the revenue comes in and I'll pay it back. And of course, as you say, your words, I think, if designed well, there's no prospect of a firm having repayment hardships with respect to such a loan. How simple. I mean, has anyone talked to you about this?
My colleague and I, John Piggott, spent about an hour in discussions with the Treasury about a year ago. They were very interested and courteous enough to talk to us about the ideas. We've done the modelling. We are fairly confident that if it's designed properly, the government will get back the vast majority of the money. Yeah. Treasury's concern was that some small businesses would perhaps cheat on the system. I think that's very unlikely if they've been established for, say, 3 or 4 years and there's some sharing of the risk with the owner of the business.
Yeah. But see, Bruce, what's the alternative? The business goes broke because at the moment you've got small businesses trying to stay afloat. They seek a new loan or credit and they have difficulty getting approval. So they go out the back door and then they go onto welfare. The Treasury understand that's the alternative to what you are saying. They go under. I mean, basically, you're saying the turnover in the tourism industry. I mean, how would anyone in the tourism industry make a case now for a loan? They've had no turnover for 15 months.
Well, they may be able to make the case if the bank is prepared to provide it, and the banks might be if the government is going to pay the unpaid debt back to the bank. But that doesn't help the small business. The trouble for the small business is there, as you suggested, the anxiety associated with having to find the money and the potential for default and foreclosure. These are very risky times, and instruments like the one I'm talking about mitigate the risk for small business and in ways that I think will not cost the budget.
Absolutely. I mean, draw on future revenue to make repayment. And, of course, you have also said there would be personal responsibility for unpaid loans. If business went under, unpaid debts would come out of the sale of the assets. You can't lose. I mean, it's a political no-brainer. Professor Bruce Chapman, do you know what the problem is with your idea?
Can you tell me?
I'll tell you. It's not theirs.
Thank you.
It's your idea. And because it's not theirs, therefore it's dismissed, isn't it? The reality that government doesn't. Oh, come on. All right, we'll pursue it. It's good to talk to you again. Thank you for the work you do. It's so simple, that's what frightens people. But it's an excellent proposal. HECS, small business HECS, agricultural HECS. Get the money so that you can keep going. And when the revenue returns, it's paid back. And if it's not, well, you lose the asset. How hard is that? Professor Bruce Chapman, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.